I am delighted to be here chatting with you. As Kelly mentioned, I live here in Livermore. I grew up in Pleasanton, so I've always had so much admiration for the contributions you have made to make our world a better place. So before I go any further, thank you guys for the work that you're doing here. You can clap for yourself. So something that I've, in the last 5 years, become very passionate about, I'd say 5 or 6 years, is our food and the food that we're eating, our food system. It really came about when I became pregnant with my first daughter, which was a little bit before. And anybody who's had a child in the last 5 to 10 years realizes that with social media and media today, they just scare the living daylights out of you. You're not supposed to do this. You're supposed to do this. Don't use this swaddle. Don't use this pacifier, but do this. And so while I came to realize that a lot of that was fear-mongering at its finest, it really did force me to start thinking about, what are we eating? Why do I always feel kind of junky? Like, I eat healthy. I was raised with what I like to call the 80s healthy, which is what was all low fat. We had a lot of Snackwells, and my favorite dessert was the no sugar added, non-fat Boston cream pie Yoplait yogurt. And so that was what we considered healthy. So I'd always had, even though it might have been a little skewed, a healthy mindset, but I never felt great. So when we had children, I really started looking about, what are we eating? And my husband and I started looking at different diets that were out there. At the time, my parents were vegan. And even though we totally made fun of them, I started thinking, like, well, maybe they're onto something. Should we look into this more? At the time, I didn't really even understand what gluten-free was. I knew what gluten was, but when I saw a package of potato chips that said gluten-free, I'm like, duh, there's obviously no gluten in potatoes. But I soon realized that they'll throw gluten into anything, so you do have to kind of watch it. One thing that really started to strike a chord with me, though, was the paleo diet. Not because I wanted to replicate what our ancestors ate and go foraging for nuts and seeds and chew on a boar leg all day, but I really liked that it felt like it wasn't a really processed diet. And I felt that if we'd spent all of these years, our bodies have evolved for all of these years to process food properly, then maybe the food that we should be eating is the food that our bodies have evolved to eat. And so we started out with paleo. That's where we landed. And for somebody whose favorite food was bread and cheese, that was a daunting task. Day one, I'm like, wait, I can't have French fries and ranch dressing? I don't know how this is going to really work. But we stuck with it, and within a month, I started feeling a lot better. And chronic things that I'd dealt with, that I always had just thought of as normal, that we as society think like, oh, well, everyone's got allergies, everyone has asthma or eczema. For me personally, I had IBS that would just never go away, adult acne, and then allergies that couldn't be diagnosed. I saw so many doctors, and nobody could tell me why I would get these raging sneezing attacks and have just so much congestion all the time. I did a bunch of allergy tests, and the most significant result came back for a mild allergy to dust mites. And that didn't get me out of cleaning the house, so it was completely worthless. But I never figured it out. And then fast forward to when we changed our diet up to start focusing just on whole, real foods. And that's why when I heard paleo, I think we get a stigma of this caveman mentality. But for me, it was just about cleaning up our diet and starting to read labels and understanding what is it that we're putting into our body. While most people here can read a label, and I'm sure you understand the different chemicals or whatever's added to it, I don't think the average consumer really always understands what we're eating. And so we just really started paying attention. Like, are we eating real food, whole foods? And I started feeling really great. And So I realized that this meant something to me, and I wanted to do something with it. And so I remember one night I was sitting on the couch with my husband, and I turned to him and I said, I'm going to start a food blog. And he's looking at me like, okay, it's not anything that was in my realm. And I turned to him, I'm like, I didn't get much of a reaction, so I wanted a reaction too from him. I'm like, and I'm going to write a cookbook. And he's like, okay, there you go. So here I am. I've done both so far. And I shortly after started my blog. It took me forever because technical computer stuff is not my forte. Throw me in a kitchen, I will whip you up a great meal, but put me in front of a computer and try to start a blog, and it took me about 4 months, which should take, if anyone's tried that, it should have taken me maybe a day. But so I started sharing what I was doing on social media, and it really resonated with people. And something that I learned very quickly on into this endeavor, into sharing whole foods and cooking, was that clean eating can get a really pretentious feel to it. When we see images of health in the media, we see these hard bodies eating these perfect diets. Every day you have a kale smoothie and chia seeds for lunch, whatever. But I don't think that's realistic. I mean, I don't eat like that, and I think it can really turn people off, and I think that there's a better way. I think that we can change the dialogue from health, from being this really image-driven thing, to just focusing on being well and eating well. And so I really wanted to change the stigma of that pretentious feeling when we come to health and wellness. And so I just started being real with what we eat. We aren't always perfect. We still have pizza nights. We still have frozen yogurt after soccer. But the difference is that we've switched the ratio of how often we're eating that. Whereas before, I would have, for breakfast, this would be a very typical breakfast, would be a latte on my way to work and a bagel downstairs from my office with cream cheese. And then at lunch, I would have a giant sandwich on Dutch Crunch with like pickles and maybe a slice of tomato and a cup of broccoli cheese soup, and then for dinner, pasta. And so when you kind of look at that, like, where are the veggies? Where was the real protein? And it's all food that we've come to know, but the ratios were way off. Like, I mean, I was eating mostly bread and lattes, I think. And so today we fast forward is that the majority of what I have and my children have and my husband have are comprised of fruits and vegetables, healthy protein. We've started becoming a little bit more aware of where our protein sources are coming from. And in turn, we'll have some dairy with that. So for example, if I make a salad, I might sprinkle a little bit of goat cheese on it. So the ratios flip, that now I'm really focused on quality proteins and vegetables and that, and then I sprinkle in the rest of the stuff. So, and I've been feeling great from that. So that was the message that I really wanted to share. I wanted people to realize that they could do this too. Another thing that I realized quickly on was that so many of us have forgot how to cook, or we've never even really learned because we've become so accustomed to getting our food from someone else or just heating something up in the microwave. I think that was another product of the 70s and 80s. Like, we had these hungry man meals that like were right there for you. You just had to pop them in the microwave. And so the convenience factor really took over the health factor. And so now what I want to do is realize that we can do both. So when I design my recipes, I design them with, can a average home cook make this? Can I, in the instructions, show somebody how to make this easily? Can we do this with minimal ingredients? For me, there's nothing that turns me off more than a recipe that I have to cook that it has like 15 to 20 plus ingredients. I will skip past that recipe so fast. Even doing what I do, I don't want to do that. I think that if we are going to be eating well, We have to be able to do it quickly and easily at home on a regular basis. So a question that I get often, and we'll do some Q&As at the end, but I want to talk about some of them before, is how do my children eat? Something that I'm acutely aware of is demonizing any foods. I think, again, in this image-driven society that we live in, it's so easy to vilify food and make pizza seem like the worst thing you can do. Having 2 young daughters, I don't want to demonize any food. So we don't talk about food in terms of how it's going to make us look. That's not part of our conversation. It's about how it makes us feel, and that it's okay that we want to fill our bodies with food that fuels us. And then when we feel like celebrating, it's okay. We can have pizza. We can connect on pizza night. We can go get ice cream to celebrate. But these are treats, and it shouldn't make up the most of our diet. When my kids, most of what they eat at home is very healthy. But at school and birthday parties, I don't care. I don't monitor it. I want them to learn how to make choices. I want them to learn that there's still room for this other stuff in their life, in their diet, and I don't want them to feel guilty about it, because I think we've all gotten so used to this diet mentality that's based on so much restriction of we can never eat this. And my mom was always on a diet growing up, and I think that might resonate a lot, especially I think the 80s really threw us off, man. Like, everybody was on some sort of diet, and their friends would talk about this. And basically, like back then, I think a diet just meant you just weren't eating anything. You're like, how little can I eat to get through this day? And so it's just really not how we talk about food in our house. And they do well. Now that they've gotten older, let me make this completely clear though. If I made some sauteed kale up and had pizza, my kids would still choose the pizza. They are still kids, but slowly and surely I'm seeing them starting to understand how to make proper decisions with what they're eating. For some reason, they are just obsessed with Gatorade. I have to share my mom win on this one. They just love Gatorade. I don't know if it's this post-soccer snack thing, but they think it is like what we would think of as like a fine wine. They really want their Gatorade. And so a few months ago, they were homesick, and they just said, they really want Gatorade. They want Gatorade. And I'm like, okay, I can use this as a teaching moment. I said, okay, guys, here's the thing. You guys aren't feeling well. There's a lot of sugar in Gatorade. There's a lot of stuff that's not going to make you feel great. But you can also, they love kombucha. They're a little strange sometimes. I think I got them early enough to condition them on some things. I'm like, or I'll grab you some kombucha and you guys can have that. It's going to have probiotics in there that's going to help you, and it's going to help you get stronger. Or if you want, you can go for the Gatorade. If that's what your body is telling you really want, you make the choice. And they both looked at each other and they go like this. We'll have the kombucha. And I was really excited because I told them, I said, you're not going to be in trouble. I want you guys to pick. And I don't know, maybe they felt guilty. They knew if they said Gatorade, I'd probably roll my eyes, but I get it. But I felt really good that they're starting to understand just how things make you feel. And so that's our approach. Like I said, I don't want it to feel like a diet. I want it to feel just, this is how we fuel our body. So as I started doing my blog and people started taking to it, I felt really good about it. I felt that there was a community that needed to be served of people that are just like us, that aren't going to dedicate their entire days to cooking, that aren't going to spend 2 hours in the gym, because there's a wide range of healthy. Healthy isn't just that end where we see, especially on Instagram now, it kills me. And just in the media in general, where everyone's got their six-pack of abs and they're walking around with their green juices. There's that end of the spectrum, and there's another end of the spectrum that's quite unhealthy. But there's a full healthy spectrum that we can achieve in the middle that we need to start talking about too. That's approachable, that feels good, that makes you feel like I can do this too. I don't need to be perfect. I don't need to be this perfect thing, because when we if we set the bar up here and we're up here, that gap is a big gap to close, and it's daunting. And the truth of the matter is nobody wants to do that. People stop listening. But when you say you can achieve that level of healthy here, you can. And once you start doing it, you start feeling better and better and better. And it makes it easier to kind of like take next steps. So something I always talk about is, if somebody's here like, okay, I want to start making changes now, where do I start? There's two ways. You can just go cold turkey, which I am horrible at cold turkey stuff. That is not my forte. But you can also start taking baby steps. For me, when we started doing paleo, I started cold turkey and I was like, no, wait, I want those fries. So I started baby stepping it, and soda was the first thing I gave up. I was a Diet Coke junkie. I loved Diet Coke. That was my fine wine. That was my Gatorade. And I said, okay, I know these aren't good for me. I can cut this out, because there's things that I can easily replace it with. And then I started doing dairy, which dairy was a hard one for me. But nowadays, there's a lot of dairy substitutes that are actually really good and minimally processed. So I started with dairy. And dairy was what really helped with my allergies. 30 days off of dairy, my allergies were gone. I could breathe. My skin cleared up. I was just floored. I couldn't believe it. And so my husband jokes now, like when I do go for dairy, because he would always listen to me snarfling and sneezing, and God bless him, like it's really annoying. But he's like, oh man, he's like, are you gonna be snarfling? And if I have a little bit of dairy, I'm fine. But the holidays, when there's cheese plates and cheesecake, I do go to town. But then it's worth it to me. And then January comes back around and I clean it up and I can breathe again. But I suggest doing baby steps. So backing up, so that's how we started getting into paleo. I need some water, hold on. So we started doing baby steps, and it made it easier and more manageable for us. And then once I was really into it, and I started my blog, and I'm like, this is great. And then I heard about Whole30. And by show of hands, how many of you are familiar or have heard of Whole30? Okay, so a lot of you. Whole30, for those of you who don't know, the Whole30 is a 30-day elimination plan where you eliminate grains, legumes, dairy, sugar, alcohol, gluten, most of the things we've come to really enjoy, sweeteners. So it's a very, very strict version of paleo, and then some. It's as fun as it sounds. So for me, I was like, oh, cool, I'm already on this paleo bandwagon. I can do this. And so I decided to do my first Whole30. I'm like, I got this. I did not complete that Whole30. It was like maybe 4 days in, and I was like, this is for the birds. And so, but then a couple months later, I'm like, no, you know what? I can give this a try. Like, I was still having some abdominal issues that I wanted to check out. And so I did it, and I felt great. I think my energy levels went up. My skin had already cleared up, and a lot of the stuff had from paleo, but I just felt this extra boost of energy. I felt better. I felt cleaner. I felt finally like, oh, is this what my body's supposed to feel like? Like, I'm supposed to not want an afternoon nap? This is weird. So I really found that powerful, and I think what I found most powerful in Whole30, backing up, that this program is supposed to be for 30 days. It's not supposed to be for the rest of your life. It's supposed to help you identify patterns that you have with your food and any intolerances you might have, and just understand how you're reacting to food. It's not meant to keep you off white rice forever or never have ice cream again. It's just supposed to help you understand food and start reading your labels. I think it's a powerful tool for somebody who's been really accustomed to living off of a processed diet to start understanding, like, oh, this is not what I'm eating. This isn't making me feel good. So a lot of the recipes that I was already making and eating happened to be Whole30 compliant. And I started doing a lot of work with them and sharing their recipes, and found this really supportive group amongst people who were just trying to understand food, because there's so much noise out there now. Like I mentioned in the beginning, there's vegan, there's keto. Every few years, there's a new diet out there for us to be paying attention to, or new superfood. Acai was that was like life-saving 5 years ago, but now I don't really see it so much. But what I liked about it is that it addressed like, hey, this is how we can start eating better. This is how we can start managing this and understanding what we eat. But also too, it got to something that resonated with me, was that it made us start understanding why we were eating the way we eat. Because for me, my like time to snack is at night when the kids are in bed. I want to sit down, zone out to some stupid show. I will lose all my credibility if I tell you the shows that I watch at night. So we'll leave it at that. But that's when I like want to snack and unwind. And when you can't snack on junk at night or in the day, you start thinking about like, because you really want it. And you start thinking about like, well, why do I want it? What am I trying? Am I actually hungry? 99% of the time, no. I am not dying of hunger for a bowl of ice cream or whatever it is. It's just an escape for me. So it started making me realize like, okay, well, I'm using this as kind of a crutch for something else, when I could go and make a less inviting cup of tea or figure out what is it. So for me, it was just, I was so stressed out at the end of the day that I just want to sit. And when you have that sugar at the end of the night or whenever, it triggers a lot of stuff in your brain to just calm down. It feels good. So for me, I tend to run on the high-strung, anxious side of things. It forced me to start paying more attention during my day of what is stressing me out and just managing that a little bit more. So I really like that Whole30. The two things I pull out of it is that it makes you read labels and it makes you understand the why of what you're eating and what's actually the root cause of it, instead of just covering it up with that delicious bowl of ice cream. So I got a lot of my audience from Whole30 because they were looking for recipes that weren't boiled chicken and steamed broccoli. And I think that when we think of healthy food, that's an image we get often, is like, that sounds great. Who wants that? But the truth of the matter is, real whole foods can be so much better. We don't have to steam and boil everything. We can actually cook them and roast them and saute them properly, and with really easy techniques. And so that's how I developed my recipes. Melissa Hartwig is the founder of Whole30, and I had written a couple ebooks because, as I told my husband, I was going to write a cookbook one way or another. And so I wrote some ebooks to provide to my audience because I wanted to be able to take it to a publisher one day. And I didn't know if I could say they were Whole30 compliant or not, so I reached out to Melissa and I said, hey, am I allowed to? Because I obviously know there's like copyright issues and that's their brand. And she said, well, no, but this is a fabulous ebook. My publisher would brain me if I let anybody use this and sell it. So no, but I think these are fabulous books. And so I'm like, okay, great. That's kind of the answer I expected. Fast forward about 8 or 9 months out, I got an email from Melissa, and it was very casual, and it was like, hey, Michelle, so I don't know if you found a book agent yet or have been talking to a publisher, but if you're interested, if that's something you're still looking for, I can introduce you. We might be able to do something down the line. It was very vague. And so I got that, and I was like, email, and knowing that this has been my goal, I was like, yeah, jumping up and down, and like, but then I emailed back and I played it so cool. I'm like, yeah, it's definitely something I'm just starting to look into. I definitely love to have that conversation. Then I'm like doing my dance, like, but I played it so cool. And like, I've told this story many times. I still don't know if she's heard it, so don't tell her. Let her think that I still played it really cool. So fast forward, they had an opportunity that I would be able to write my own cookbook and make it my own, and then label the recipes that are Whole30 compliant as Whole30 compliant. The entire cookbook isn't Whole30 compliant because that's not how I eat. That's not how my family eats. But there's enough recipes. I'd say about 75% of the book has recipes that are Whole30 compliant. So it's great for the Whole30 audience. If you're looking to do a Whole30, there's a ton of recipes in there. But the rest are great for post Whole30 because There's minimal grains, there's minimal dairy, but it still lets you incorporate that into your life. And it goes back to that reverse ratio of whereas most of my diet before was dairy and gluten, that sprinkles in now. I actually can't eat gluten anymore, but grains or dairy or sugar is sprinkled in. It doesn't make the majority of it. So it's a great resource, whether you are doing a Whole30 or not. I think you'll find that a lot of the recipes you can make for your family and friends, like the chimichurri party wings, actually, somebody in the front row has had them, and she can testify. I won't boast, but you can do it for me.
They're very good.
Thank you. We didn't plan that either. But you can make that for your friends and family, and they would never know that what they're eating is considered healthy. We've come to learn that healthy fats aren't what's making us fat and unhealthy and having heart troubles. But you want to pay attention to your fat sources. I choose things like avocado oil, olive oil, coconut oil. Even though I don't use coconut oil a ton because I'm not a huge fan of the flavor, we do incorporate it when it makes sense with the recipe. And that's the other thing. I don't think healthy food should taste boring. I don't think it should taste healthy. I think we can do a lot with the ingredients that we have. Let's see, what time is it? Still got about 10 minutes. And I lost my place. I guess I got lost in all the food. So fast forward the cookbook, and it's done very well. I'm excited. I can say now, even though I'm not technically supposed to announce it, I've started work on my second book, and it won't be out until fall 2020 during the election, which will be really great. No noise to cut through on that one. We'll have some fun election party dinners, I guess. So that's my journey into it. I mentioned that I don't eat gluten anymore. Through the course of my journey, I cut out gluten a lot, not completely until I did a Whole30. And then after I did a Whole30, I started getting really sick. And fortunately, I was in the space of already paleo and understanding how different people reacted to gluten. But it took about 4 or 5 times of me getting really sick, and in the course of 2 or 3 months. And when I say really sick, I mean, not that I would know, but it felt like the worst hangover of my life that lasted for 3 days, or as if somebody had poisoned me. I've never been poisoned, but I couldn't get out of bed. I was sick in ways that I won't explain. I would get rashes up my legs, and I couldn't understand what was happening to me. I went to several doctors. They did an endoscopy, a colonoscopy, and they couldn't diagnose me with anything. At that point, I kind of suspected celiac, and they tested me for that, and they said unless I started eating gluten regularly for 6 weeks, they couldn't diagnose me. And I realized if having one beer made me sick for 3 days, like me eating gluten again for 6 weeks was not on my radar. So I highly suspected it was gluten because those were a lot of the same symptoms that people with gluten intolerances had. So I cut it out and I stopped getting sick. I haven't consciously eaten gluten since, and I've been sick a couple of times from times when I didn't know I had gluten. Most recently was on a girls' trip in Los Angeles. We ordered creamed corn. And I mentioned, before when you see gluten-free on potato chips, and my mind's like, oh, well, it's potato chips. They're not supposed to have gluten. I don't usually make creamed corn. It's not something I make. I know some people make it with roux now. I had a small cup of it, and I proceeded to get, within an hour or two, really sick and ruin the rest of that girls' trip that we need to remake up. So I don't eat gluten. I haven't been able to get any clear answers from the numerous doctors I've eaten on why, which makes me sad, but I also feel hopeful that as we dig into our food system and understand what we're eating and how it's different, because our food system today looks vastly different than it did 50 years ago, 100 years ago, and it's affecting us. And I think more now than ever, we can look around the room and know children who have allergies. When I grew up, I don't remember anyone having an allergy, maybe a peanut allergy. Now I have 2 girls in elementary school, and they haven't been in a class yet where somebody doesn't have an allergy. So it's something that we need to just start understanding. I've been doing research on like gut biome and how antibiotic, all this stuff is played into it. And so I think it's something to just be aware of and understand it's changed, that it might affect us. My husband can still dive into a beer and cake and be happy. I have a gluten-free beer and a gluten-free cake, and it's not quite the same, but we have a lot of options. I will even say from 5 years ago, how much our food system has changed to adapt to these allergies. There are so many gluten-free products out there now that you don't have to feel like you're missing out. Dairy-free products, there's dairy-free cheese spreads that I think are better than some normal cheese spreads. So fortunately, there are options for us if we are now looking to have a diet that we don't want to do gluten, we don't want to do dairy, we aren't feeling great for it. We don't have to miss out on these items anymore, which is really good.